Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm doing a little book restructuring, and so I thought I'd film a little bookshelf tour for you. You can see here I have a lot of my fantasy and sci-fi books. I'm going to put them on these empty shelves here so that way they're all together. On the left hand side here we have the Barnes & Noble Classics. Now those were on that very bottom right hand shelf there, and I think I'm going to move them to the back office where I keep my nonfiction books, and so you don't really see those. If you want to tour that shelf, let me know, I can film that as well. The set of Game of Thrones books were in that back office, but I wanted to move them out here to keep the fantasy and sci-fi books mostly together. You can see I also have a lot of Brandon Sanderson, some Patrick Rothfuss, Robert Jordan, and C.S. Lewis books as well. And so those are going to go on those empty shelves there. Let's do a time lapse while I organize the shelves, and then I'll kind of give you an overview as well. Alright, and now we're going to get into the bookshelf tour portion for the video. Feel free to pause the video at any point if you want to look a little bit further in depth. I'm not going to highlight every single book on my shelves, just kind of wanted to give a nice little overview. If you want to hear me speak about any book specifically that you'd like to learn more about, feel free to let me know in the comments. So we're going to start with the books that I have read, and then we'll get into the books that are still on my physical TBR at the moment. And the first book that I did want to highlight is The Living Sea of Waking Dreams by Richard Flanagan. I absolutely love this book. It's probably one of my top 5. And I really don't hear this book spoken a lot about, even though I think Flanagan is a pretty well-known author. The book follows our main character who is kind of slowly disappearing, and that tracks along with some animals that are disappearing as well. And so the book deals a lot with climate change, and it also deals a lot with family relationships as the main character's mother is in a nursing home. And the next book that I wanted to highlight on the shelf is Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. Again, I think a pretty well-known author at this point, probably one of America's better-known modern authors. I haven't read anything else by Franzen. We will see a few of his books in my unread shelf. I read this for a paper back in college and absolutely loved the book. The book is a little thick. I think it's around 600 or so pages, but it's a great family drama, politics, the effect that politics can have on our families. Alright, and here we are on the second shelf for my read books. The first book that I did want to highlight here is going to be Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. This is a book set in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and I absolutely love this book. I love Kennedy's writing in it. I'm very much looking forward to a next novel. I think that she has a collection of short stories out, which I'm honestly not the biggest short story person, but maybe I will get around to checking that out. The next book is going to be The Colony by Audrey Maggie. Again, a book set in Ireland. This one deals with an island off the coast of Ireland where an artist goes to paint and becomes ingrained in the local culture. I won't give away the ending, but it deals a lot with about how people from outside come in, connect with local communities, things like that. Some other highlights on this shelf include David Mitchell's books. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of my favorite for David Mitchell, which is Cloud Atlas. Love that book as I was getting back into reading. Really want to get around to rereading that and getting another copy. David Joy is another author that I really like on this shelf, And then Human Acts by Hong Kong was a book that I read earlier this year that I really can't say I enjoyed because of the very heavy subject matter, but it was one of my favorites. And so I'll probably talk about that when I do my end of year list coming up next month. And then this is going to be the third bookshelf here. One of my absolute favorites is Paul Murray's The Bee Sting. We will see a Murray book come up later on when we get into the unread section. Another one that I really like on this shelf is Andrew O'Hagan's Mayflies. I spoke about this, I think, in my last video when I spoke about reading O'Hagan's The Illuminations. Love this book, love the emotional impact that it punches. It's about a group of friends kind of growing up in the punk scene in 1980s UK. They become reunited later on, and it kind of deals with the fallout of that and long-term friendships. Another author that I like, I believe also from the UK, is Caleb Zuma Nelson's Small Worlds as well as Open Water. Both incredibly beautiful books. The writing is incredible, and I'm really looking forward to what Zuma Nelson puts out next. And now we're getting into the last shelf for the read books, and also starting on some of the unread books that I still need to get around to. Some highlights here include Douglas Stewart's books, one of my favorite authors. He has a new one coming out in 2026 that I am incredibly excited for. I love the way that he writes relationships. I love the way that he writes about Scotland, easily one of my favorite countries. And his writing just really brings me back to a time that I have spent in Scotland. I also have a lot of Kurt Vonnegut in here as well, one of my favorite authors as I was getting back into reading. And then in terms of unread here, we have a lot of Chinua Achebe. I have read Things Fall Apart a couple of times during school, and so that could probably be moved into the other section, but I have 3 of his here. You can't really see it, but the third copy is A Man of the People. And then the book that you can't really see there on the far end is Libra by Don DeLillo. And sorry for the shaky quality on this one. I did have to hold my tripod up. Again, we can see Underworld by Don DeLillo, a couple more of the Franzen books that I spoke about. Up here on the top is my collection of Series of Unfortunate Events that I've had since I was young, so I have read all of those. Some others on this shelf that I'm looking forward to are going to be Great Expectations by Dickens, obviously a classic, Lark Ascending by Silas House, great Southern author. Moving on, we have some James Kelman, who I was recommended after I went and saw Douglas Stewart give it a speech. His book, How Late It Was, very controversial when it won the Booker Prize for being written in the Scots language. I picked up Dirt Road when I was in Scotland, and what I really like about that is it does go from the US to Scotland, and so it feels like it may be a little personal for me. Some other authors that I'm really looking forward to here are going to be Grace by Paul Lynch. I have a lot of Toni Morrison to get through, as well as Skippy Dies by Paul Murray, and Richard Powers' Playground. And moving on to the final shelf for the unread literary fiction section of my shelves, we have here some authors like Allie Smith, Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch. I love The Secret History. I know it's incredibly popular. And then we also have some book talk, booktube darlings such as Hani Yanagihara's A Little Life and John Williams' Stoner. These are books that I should probably get around to sooner rather than later now that I am here on the platform. Looking forward to those. In keeping with a Scottish author kind of theme that really interests me, I have Irvine Welsh's Trainspotting. I have started this, I just wasn't in the right mood for it. Again, it's written in a Scots language, and so coming from an American perspective, that can be a little difficult to kind of follow along with sometimes, as well as the language just used in the books generally, as it follows people struggling with addiction and living in pretty dire conditions. And lastly, this is the Barnes & Noble Classic Editions that I moved here to my nonfiction bookshelf. Again, let me know if you want a tour of the nonfiction books. I've read most of those, but I still do have a good number of unread books for that shelf. So far from here, I've read The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and The Odyssey by Homer. thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Let me know if you have read any of these or if any of these are on your TBR that you're really looking forward to. And thanks so much.